one of the first steps when working with a character and Toon Boom Harmony is that we need to create a character template. To create the template file so that we can reuse the character between scenes requires us to pay attention to a couple of separate but important elements. One is that we need to have a master peg with our character, and that master peg does require a keyframe. So I need to, if I haven't added a master peg to my character yet, I need to do so. And then I will collapse on the master peg, click on frame 1, and hit the function key F6 to add in that keyframe. If I don't do that, it will allow me to make a character template, but then when I try and use that in my scene, it won't copy over and it won't work correctly. So that's why it's important for us to make sure that we have that master peg. So I should be able to close my entire character rig under one master peg element. Master peg collapsed, keyframe made. I go and drag over almost. Because ideally what we want to do is we want to go to our library and add this to our library. But if we want to use this outside of this file, we need to store it in a library location. Now, Toon Boom refers to the folders on our computer as libraries because if I right-click in my library window over here and choose Open Library, I can now just choose a folder. So I'll just choose the desktop as a library, and then I'm going to make a new folder to hold my templates that I'm going to be using with my upcoming project here. So I will make a new folder, and I'll call this Character Templates. Now you could also store, say, a background set. So again, if I'm running and doing a series, so I have multiple episodes for my story I'm working on, I could have all of my locations stored as set templates. So I can just go and drag those into whatever scene project I'm working on so I can recycle and reuse regularly. So I've made that folder and I will say choose. And now if I look in my library over here, it shows up as a folder allowing me access to it. And it would be nice if the next step is to I drag over here to add it, and it added it, but it didn't add it to my character templates folder. It added it to my symbols. Symbols is an internal library for that open project. So if I open a different project, whatever's in the symbols doesn't show because it's tied to this particular project. So I'm going to undo that. If I look close, I will notice that Character Templates has a lock icon on it. That lock icon means this folder is locked, which is why it rejected it when I tried to add my template to it. To unlock it, I right-click on the folder and I select the option Write to Modify. When I do that, the lock disappears. With that lock gone, I can now drag my layer that are collapsed on my master peg over to the empty library window. And we can see it's adding it, and I get to name it whatever I want. And I will call this Green Two-Face. And now it exists in my Character Templates library. Two-Face has been added to my Character Templates library. Now I'm going to add another character to my library so I can have two characters to work with. Working with my second character, I can see this character where he has he does have the different mouth shapes, so he will be able to be set for lip syncing. The arms and legs are all rigged. It's under a master peg. I am going to make sure that I have named this peg This would be my JW master peg. So I've renamed it. Now when I go to open this or to create a template, so it is master peg. I'm going to go back to frame 1 and hit F6 just to make sure there's a keyframe that's been added to all my layers. But when I look close, I will see that the lock has returned. Every time you open a new project, the library will be locked. And that prevents you from making accidental changes to it. Harmony is expecting you to be intentional about if you're going to make changes to this, you need to explicitly say, yes, I understand that there's consequences if I do that, so I need to have rights to modify. So right click, choose right to modify. Now once again, I will drag that over there. And I will just call this JW and put that into it. If we want to change our view so we can see what these are, I could even go thumbnails, and it's going to work on generating thumbnails for each of them, so you can see I now have thumbnails in my library as well. Here's the been added to my library. Now what I'm going to do is create a brand new scene. And it's going to be called new scene. That works. Don't need to save. So brand new scene. There's my library ready to go. Can bring out my character, bring out a copy of that JW. Now I can bring out a copy of Greenface. There's Greenface there. So I've now added them both to my scene. Because they do have pegs associated with them, I can now select, and I will move this character over here. I'm going to get rid of these additional action keyframes because I don't care about those right now. We'll add some action in later. Can move this character over, down, and I can even scale up the character so that they both exist on frame. Now I've created a new scene. I've used both of my characters, but if I were to drag out again, we can bring out a second copy. Now both of these exist independent from each other, so with that, if I were to go into the second green face here, let's go find his face layer. If I go into that face layer, I could even add in a new color. And with that, it's been added in, and we can see that it does not affect the other one. So they are truly independent from each other now. They are copies of the original template file. If I go back into my original Greenface file and change that, that will not affect this template file. So this template file is a snapshot of what that file was at the moment in time I made this template. So I could keep evolving the character even though I made a template of it in this state or this condition. It is also possible to go in and modify the template, which will affect future uses of it. But once I have put a copy of this template object in my scene, it is no longer connected to that template. It just used it as a way to duplicate it. With multiple characters in the scene, we can now start talking about how to organize them and work with it. I've opened up the layers for one of the green faces, and we can see where certain layers only exists through part of it. So the profile mouth exists in the second half. The front mouth is in the first half of the timing. And then there is no right eye because we can't see it in the profile view, so it doesn't continue out. And certain layers of the right ear, the right eye, jaw, none of these needed to continue into the profile view, so they were just turned off. But otherwise, if I look at the neck, we can see up in the next library how we have the two views for the neck occurring, so the front view and the profile view. Same thing with the skull. There were the two views of the skull to be used. The ear, and the left ear. Now the left ear has an interesting thing that needed to happen, and that did require nudging to occur to get the ear to keyframe on top of the face. Because if I look here, the left ear is behind the face. But if I go to the profile view, the left ear is on top of the face. And the way that we can accomplish that is through nudging. Nudging, we have to modify something in the Harmony preferences. And what we have to change is under General, we have to select Focus on Mouse Enter. You have to check that box, because with that box unselected, to turn the focus to my camera view, I have to click in the camera view. To go to my library view, click in the library. We see the red box indicates focus. Timeline, I have to click in the timeline. The challenge is to nudge something, we need to click in the timeline but return the focus to the camera. And to do that, the only way we can do it without re-clicking on something is we need to have Harmony focus on mouse enter. So I choose focus on mouse enter. I'll click OK. And what that allows me to do is if I move my mouse, we can see the red box indicates what is now the focused window. So step 1 for nudging, turn on focus on mouse enter. Step 2, click on the drawing you are trying to change the nudging, and this is a keyframeable property. So I click on the drawing I want to nudge, in this case the ear. I switch to the animation tool, the transform tool. Let me go back and click here again. And now I turn my focus to the camera window. When I do that, I can now nudge forward and backward within my Z space. So we think about Z space as coming closer to the camera or further away from the camera. And we're able to do that by holding down the Option key and then looking at the up and down arrows. If you think about the up and down arrow being in a top-down view, so we're in the top-down view. So this top-down view, this line indicates all of my artwork. And we can see this little pink area right here is indicating that is the ear that is currently selected. And if I want to nudge that ear in space, I hold down Option, and I can now pull it forward or back one very tiny increment. Instead of moving it a layer, which is moving like 1,000 steps, I can now move it one frame. We can see how the ear, well, we won't see it. Let me zoom out. So now the ear isn't there because it's behind the head. Now if I hold down Option and push the down arrow so it's pulling it forward, we can see it's now in front of the face. And we can further verify that if I look at the layer and look at its X, Y, Z coordinates. On the Z axis, it can see it's 1,000th of a frame F, or front. I hold down, let me get the correct window active again. Hold down Option, push the up arrow so it's going to push it away from me in Z space. We can now see its position is 0. I can even nudge something further back in space by Option and up arrow, and now we see it's 001B. So it's further back. So we have F and B that we can move it. So that positions the ear in front. with nudging out of the way, now what I'm going to do is clean off the existing layers, content for that character, so I will just delete what is there, go back to frame 1, there is the face. If I want to extend this out, I can hit F5, that extends it out. Now if I want to change my character so it switches to a profile view at frame 30. So at frame 30 I want to go to a profile view. I'm going to pull up the layer library here, and we can see that the mouth for the profile view is currently at nothing because it's turned off. But if I want the non-talking mouth, that is X. So all of the mouths have been properly named, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I have the bonus mouth with the L, and then finish that with an X. So I'll put the X there, and now we can see that has happened. So I will continue this out, hit F5 to extend that out. So now we have the profile mouth. Now what I can do is even delete those and start turning on the layers that I need. I know I don't need the front mouth. The right eye doesn't show in this profile view, but I do want the left eye. If I go into my drawing, there is the front version of the eye, but the eye has an alternate view, which is the left view. The nose has an alternate view, and then that is going to be the left nose. Now you can also cycle through the drawings quickly using the square bracket keys. So I can now take these and cycle into the views that I need with it. I don't need a right ear. I will want a left ear, but in the profile view, and this is where that ear will need to get nudged. So I might as well just take care of that now. I've clicked on the drawing, move to my camera view, option, down arrow to pull it closer to me. Skull doesn't really matter, it's not showing in my artwork, so I can leave that, but I do need the neck. So I will switch to the neck. So now I can see which layers I need for my profile view, and I'm hitting F5 to extend those out. So now I have front, profile, simple, basic, turn. With Audition, if I envelope each piece, then I can then export out the pieces. So I can export out a selection, or I can just export one track at a time. So I could just export this section, and this track is the alien. I'm going to put it in my scene folder. Actually, no, we'll put it in this folder here, and then we'll grab it from there, because Harmony will copy over a version of it. Send over the second file. All right, drag out copies of those. You can see the individual files as they've been set out. One has audio where the other does not. With the audio, when we bring it in, to track it to a given face or character, what I want to do is to identify which one I'm using. Now I have the other green character here, and its layers, we can see our mouth profile 1, mouth front 1, where my original green face is mouth profile, mouth front. And if I look at the Wick character, his mouth is just mouth. The first thing I want to do is to bring in my audio files. So I will go find those 2 files that I made, bring in one at a time. Choose import again. Let's see, there it is. Expand out the scene to allow for the audio to take place. When you're bringing in audio, it's often you feel like you're going much longer than what it takes, because as you're looking at it, you look at it in terms of frames, not as time. So we have to remember that this is taking place over time. So it looks like these 2 clips bring us out to about 390 frames. So there is the audio by Scrub.
You stole my dog to die, alien.
Okay, so there it's working. To do the lip syncing with this, right click on the audio layer, auto lip sync detection. You have to do that for each audio layer. Once I've done that, now with the JW layer, I can go lip sync. I'll choose map lip sync, and then I need to choose the correct layer to go with it. And there is the mouth, because I'm doing the JW layer right now. It is just called mouth. I'll select that. If I open up that character, I will see there is the mouth. If I scrub the timeline, you'll see how the mouth is moving. If I turn back on scrubbing up the sound.
You stole my dog. Prepare to die, alien.
So we can see the lip syncing is indeed working with that. I go to the other audio layer, map lip sync. This time I just want to choose mouth front initially. And then I will choose lip sync, map lip sync, mouth profile. Having done that, now if I open up the green layer, I will see that both mouths are, you can see how they're both responding to the sound, which is pretty fun. The trick now is to determine when you want a front or when you want a profile view. So going back to the beginning here, if I know that through this beginning part I don't want the profile mouth to show up, I missed. Click and drag, hit delete. Now we just have
You stole my dog.
the front, and now there will be the profile view. So with the Wick character, if I want that character to show up for more than its 1 frame, I can just take the character and extend it out through the duration, hit F5. Now the character will appear. So as you can see,
You stole my dog. Prepare to die.
working with the camera inside of Harmony is mostly straightforward process. We add a camera layer, so click on the plus in your layer palette, add in a camera. Once the camera's been added, to use it to do more than just sit there, we need to add a peg to it, because the peg is how we are able to animate the camera through the scene. So with the camera layer selected, I click on the Add Peg button. I will then collapse on the camera layer, go to frame 1, and hit F6 on the keyboard. Once I have done that, I can now scrub through my timeline. I will just turn off scrubbing with the audio so I don't have to listen. At this point, I want to zoom in on my Wick character. So to do that, I can use my advanced animation tools for the camera, or I can click on the transform tool. Both of those will work in this instance. So if I'm zoomed out, you can see there is my camera view. And if I want to zoom in on the character, there we can see how the red box represents my finished frame. To reposition, if I switch to the transform tool or translate tool, I can now position what character is centered. So we can see how it zooms in. Now if I want to have it hold here and then punch in, I can now repeat that process. And I like using the transform tool better. I'm going to really punch in, but I don't want this to be an animated punch in. I want it to jump. This is where we switch from a motion keyframe, which is indicated in the timeline by the curving line, to a stop motion keyframe indicated by the straight line. I can also right click on the layer and change the keyframe somewhere in that. Set to stop motion keyframe. I do so the line between keyframes just disappeared, and now we will see it holds and holds and holds and then jumps. So we're able to create a jump cut using stop motion keyframes. And we can then have a zoom if we want. Or from this keyframe, if I want to pan over to the next character, I can do so by moving out in the timeline. And at this point, I can click Add a keyframe. And I can click again. Grab the translate tool and move over. Oh, the other character needs to be extended out, so we'll extend out green face. We can see there's green face. Both of his layers are currently active, so it's a little bit ugly. So we can extend that out and pull it over. So I do need to go through and modify which of the views I'm looking at, the front or profile at this point. So working with the camera is a mix of using motion and stop motion keyframes, using the translate, scale, and even the rotate tool if desired. So from here, I'm just going to add in another keyframe and relocate the Wick character on screen. If I want, I could go over a couple frames, grab rotate, rotate the scene a little bit. Now rotate it back. And one thing about keyframes is I have this first keyframe here, this keyframe here. Now if I want to, I can copy, so highlight those keyframes, copy those, and then just paste in the timeline, so now it repeats those frames. That's the advantage of using keyframes, is you can copy and paste them. Now if I want to go back to the default original one, I can copy that, go further out in time, paste that out, and now I can see how I can get the camera shake occurring with it. If I want to further build that up, I could even add some scaling as well. A little punch in, or I mean punch out, now punch in. And you can see how it gives dramatic camera shake and movement with it, with minimal effort on my part. These keyframes are happening too close together, too far apart. Simply drag the keyframe. So if I play it, if I'm happy with the speed, I can leave it. If I want to adjust it, I can click on the keyframe or keyframes and move them further out in time to speed up, or in this case, slow down the motion.